All right. Good morning. This is Mike Dane with MLS Technology. Let me pull this back just a little bit. There we go. All right. We're going to wait just a little bit before we get started with the course content, but I did want to run through just a couple basics about the course itself or the class itself. All of you guys are going to be starting on mute by default. That means that if you do have a question, you'll have to direct that into the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. There's also a little chat section down there. Try to make sure that all of your questions are focused into the Q&A section, while the chat is going to be better for any comments that you'd like to share, examples, any stories. If there's something that you guys don't need to ask a question about or just maybe want to offer as a commentary, put those into chat. Now the session is going to be recorded. We'll be sending a link to the recording after class is over. But if there are any audio or video issues during the course, any problems at all with how the webinar is appearing or how the sound is coming through, anything like that, please let us know. If you're having problems, there's a very good likelihood that somebody else might be as well. So just let us know in chat, Q&A, hit the raise hand button. I don't really care if there's a problem with your participation, then we want to make sure that you're able to get in. Also, this is not a CE credit class currently, but we have submitted the paperwork to be able to get that set up so that we'll now have a 2-hour-long Matrix CE credit class. As far as I'm aware right now, we haven't gotten that approved, so this class unfortunately will not be CE, but our afternoon class will be. All right. Now, as far as the buttons go, again, down at the bottom, you've got that Q&A and chat option. The Q&A and chat, again, are going to be typing options for anything that you want to type out, message us with. There is a raise hand button. We're going to be using this effectively as a just a notification that you have a question that you would like to ask with your voice. So again, use Q&A for any questions, chat for any commentary, and that raise hand option is going to be effectively just a, hey, I'd like to be unmuted to ask a question kind of option. There will be a couple points where I'll just use that as kind of a quick ask for, you know, an impromptu poll kind of situation, but not as common. All right. If you are joining us on a mobile device, just as a reminder, you're going to need to tap the screen in order for those buttons to appear down at the bottom. But after you tap it, you should be able to see those. So again, same thing, raise hand for being unmuted, chat for any commentary, Q&A for any questions. All right. I'm going to wait just another minute here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. But hopefully you guys are enjoying the nice weather. And we might as well launch our start of class poll. Actually, we'll share the results real quick and then get started with the course itself. Looks like we got everybody here that's hoping to be here today. So we've got a couple people who are new, one who's relatively new, another person who's definitely not. So at least half the class has actually used Matrix before. For those of you guys who are relatively new to it, we'll be making sure to give a lot of context to some of the stuff that we're going to be discussing today. I want to make sure you guys understand why we'll be using things not necessarily just how to use it. All right, so get that out of the way. Let's go ahead and get started. All right. So again, my name is Mike Dane. I'm the training director here at MLS Technology. Today, we're going to be going through the Matrix MLS system. This is the foundational element of the MLS. This is where all the listing data is actually going to be stored and searched for. We do have a couple of reminders that have been populated on your screen. We're going to be talking a little bit about some of that stuff later, but there is a little news and alerts section when you guys first get in. But essentially, the Matrix system is actually going to be the listing data itself getting put into a system that you guys can search, you guys can connect to contacts, you guys can create favorite searches or watch out for what's happening in certain market areas. We're going to be discussing a lot of things today about that. But when you first get into Matrix, you're going to be landing on a homepage that try and gives you at least a little bit of direction in any capacity that you guys are trying to fill that day. So we've got our hot sheets. This is actually what's referred to as a widget. We've got a market watch section, again, another widget. And we've got a little search option over here to the right. Now you may notice that some of the layout that I have is a little different than maybe how you have things laid out. This is all customizable on the homepage. So as time goes on, when you guys are starting to get more comfortable with how you're using the system and what parts and pieces of the system you're using, it might be a good idea to come back to this homepage and revisit adjusting how things are laid out. So for instance, in my case, I like having this external links here so that I can quickly jump to another part of our MLS membership. So for instance, instead of having to go back to our MLS portal just to get into transaction desk, I've got a handy link right here for it. Same thing with showing time and Sentry Key. Some of the other widgets that you guys have available to you, you can get rid of if you're not using them. So for instance, originally we had a little learning lab option, which again, for those of you guys who are new to the system, this might be incredibly beneficial. But after you guys have learned everything you can from it, there's an option to simply minimize this widget. Or if you guys just want to get it off of your screen, there's a little X and it'll actually shuffle it off into this additional section. So again, if you have a widget that you're not using too frequently, you can either collapse it so that you can just quickly expand it again later. Or if we hit this X, notice it's actually going to dump it at the bottom here of this additional widget. So I hit the X and it shuffles it down under there. So if there are things that you guys are using frequently, you can move those back out onto your screen from the additional section or get rid of them and put them back under the additional widget just by hitting that little X. And then of course, collapse the additional widgets so that you can kind of tuck everything up into a nice little concise homepage. Now we're going to be skipping a couple of things here. In the 3-hour version of this class, we actually spend some time going through the hot sheets and market watch. We do have an advanced matrix class that actually covers a couple of these things, as well as some videos that we'll be including when we send out the recording. But before we spend any time on those, I'm actually going to direct your attention over here to the search widget. Now, the search widget is one of the few widgets on this homepage that I recommend everybody keeps up there. Part of the reason is that this allows us to just quickly jump into a search for a specific address. So for instance, if you have an agent get in contact with you and they wanted to discuss a certain listing, likely it's not going to be some listing number that they're giving you. They're going to ask you if you can find a certain address. So subsequently, we can put the address in a more simplified form into this search up here. Now, when I say that it's a simplified form, what I mean is that if you have an address, so for instance, if I had, it's a little larger, there we go, 33200 East 151st Street South. Now, I have a city, a state, a zip, or whatever, but whenever we're running our search on this homepage, there's only going to be 2 elements that it actually needs. We need to get the house number put in, and we need to get the street's name. Now, when we say the street name, we don't mean the east at the beginning or the south at the end. All I'm looking for is just the house number and the street's name. That's it. So 33200-151. And then when I hit search, this is effectively running a historical search to find all of the properties that have those two elements in them. Now, thankfully, the vast majority of listings and properties, in fact, are actually going to be able to be tracked by just those two pieces. There's always going to be those outliers where it might be somebody that, has a property on Main Street. And of course, there's Main Street in a dozen different cities across the state. So you may end up finding a bunch of results for that, and then you have to narrow it down by school district or some other means. But this will at least get a jump start on that. So as we can see, even here on this on this particular search, we've got a bunch of properties that were houses, and then a couple that were actually listed as vacant land. And actually, while we're looking at this screen, I wanted to mention something else. So all of the listing data that we have in our system, we've been meticulously collecting since 1992. This was when we first initiated the digital version of the MLS details. Now, over on the left-hand side here, we've been actually naming each of the MLSs, so each listing itself, by a specific naming convention. So how this works is that we actually have the first two digits of the MLS number are going to be what year that listing was initially entered. So we can see this one right here has been entered in 2018, 2016, but each of these numbers has the first two digits being the year, and then 5 digits afterwards that are going to be the actual listing number for that year. You may notice that there's a couple on here that are actually only 6-digit long MLS numbers. And we can just assume in this case that the leading zero, so if this was put in this case, 2008, the leading zero was dropped off so that it is just the 8 from the year and then the 5 digits from the listing number itself. So if we wanted to double check that, we can click on any of the listing numbers. So like, let's take a look at this one in 2007. You can see that it was entered 2007, which is why we have a 6-digit long MLS number. Now, thankfully, we're all the way up in the 20s now, so we don't have to worry about that too much. But if you guys do end up coming across a listing from back in the day while you guys are doing some research on a property, you can just double check those numbers down there. And actually, when we start doing our full coverage of the search a little bit later here, we're going to be discussing how to actually find listings history as well. All right, now that's about it for our homepage coverage. Again, there's some extra links on here that I would suggest you guys play around with, double check if you're going to be using. But in the interim, let's actually head up to the top right here. We're going to verify that all of the information that we have in Matrix is up to date and ready for use. Now, to the right of where you have your name appearing up at the top, there's going to be a little drop-down button and a button here for settings. Settings is where we're going to find just a couple things that, again, we're not going to be discussing in our class today, but we want to actually navigate over here to this My Information section. Now, the reason why we want to get this all lined up in advance is because if we end up going through all the search stuff and we find a property that might be of interest to a buyer and we send it off to them, the information that's going to be connected to that email and to the portal that you guys are going to be giving them access to is all going to be found on this My Information section. So even if you guys aren't taking notes on anything else during the class, this is the one area that I would recommend that you guys double check everything is correct in. So again, we got here by clicking on the little drop down to the top right, clicked on settings, and then clicked on the section that said My Information. Now, when you first land on here, it's going to bring us to this tab up here at the top that says Information. We have our first and last name according to what the member details show. If there are any inaccuracies in the information that's already present on this page, just as a reminder, that's information that was fed over to our membership team when you first became a member of the MLS. So if you notice that your name is incorrect, or maybe your last name hasn't been updated after a marriage, maybe you've got an email address that needs to be updated now that you have the officially branded one, whatever the case may be, if you guys notice that there's something that's wrong when you first get here, make sure to get in contact with us. Now, there are some spaces on here that are just open. So if you notice that there's information that's been entered, like in this case, my cell phone number, that's actually something that I just had to enter manually. If you notice there's something that's wrong on here and you kind of want to update it immediately, it's going to be grayed out, but there will be a little option over here to the right that says to override. So for instance, if you guys maybe have your legal name is Robert and then you want to go by Bob, instead of changing how you're billed and changing how you guys are going to have information sent to you by mail, you can always just come to this override option and change it manually. So for instance, instead of it being training agent, if I wanted it to appear as trainer, I can just hit that override option and it takes the gray space and turns it into an open text space for me to change. But make sure that you guys have all of the correct information on here and then hit save down at the bottom. Now, once we hit save, what's going to end up happening is that whenever we send information off to those clients, it's going to include all of the correct details for us. Now, further information can be found in a bunch of different places on our system. So we have an option to update our header and footer as well. This is going to be the information that's going to appear whenever you print off any reports. When you first get onto this page, it's going to be fairly simple. It's going to ask you if you would like to choose a specific theme. So in this case, green's my favorite color, so I'm going to check this checkbox here and hit preview. Once you guys have chosen your theme, it'll bring you to that page that we initially saw where we can add in a photo. So we can use custom photo, upload something of our own. We can also change what branding will appear. So for instance, if we wanted to change which parts and pieces of our contact information we want to share, there's a drop down here that allows us to change that. So for instance, instead of choosing my cell, if I wanted to do my office number, I can switch that out and notice it changes it up here as well. So that way we can put in as much or as little information as we want. So I've got all of those added on to the header. And then if I wanted to include a print footer, I can include even further information down here. And there's only 4 spaces, but we can include that as well. Now, for those of you guys who do have some corporate branding regulations in regards to how your name will appear or what colors are appearing on any of the documentation you send to clients, there is an option to upload a custom image banner. And there's even options to customize the colors as well. So for instance, even though I may like this, if I wanted to maybe change the way that that yellow appears, I can change that color either manually, or if you guys do have some corporate branding that you need to use, just ask your company's design department for the hexadecimal code. They'll almost inevitably know what that means. But once you guys are finished on this page, you can make sure to hit save. Again, for now, the header and footer section, it used to be significantly more important back when we had a different portal. But now the header and footer is only appearing whenever you guys are sending off reports. We'll be discussing how to print those reports a little bit later. We also have the CMA cover sheet. We're not going to be discussing this too much in class today. During our 3-hour version of Matrix, we do have a little bit of coverage of this, but you guys can learn more about the CMAs and CMA cover sheets and the CMA reports in our CMAs and Matrix class, which I believe is actually coming up soon, but I strongly recommend that one. It's very interactive. We do have an email signature section. This one I'm not going to spend too much time on because it's extremely simple. If you guys already have an email and an email signature that you use, copy it, paste it in here, and you're done. It's really that simple. It'll recognize any of the fonts that you're using, any of the links that you provided in it. It'll even copy over any images that you have. So notice I've got our logo and our certification here. Any of that information will just be added on to here so that you guys can just use it right away. You don't have to go through some manual upload problem or having to change all of the text so that it's bold or italic or got a hyperlink to it. Copy paste it, you're good to go. Finally, we have a one home section. Now, as I mentioned before, the header and footer used to be a part of our portal that we would send off to clients. Now we have a new system simply called One Home. It's way easier to use for people. There's a lot more polish to it. It's a lot more modern. So it's a It's a pretty huge improvement for the clients. And subsequently, we also needed to make some adjustments to how our contact information was going to appear. So instead of having a header and footer that would appear both on printed documents as well as the portal, all of the changes that you can make to your information that will appear on the portal are going to be under this one home category. So again, double check that you have all the correct information down here at the bottom. There's an upload option for photos to make sure that you have the same photo. And just to give the same spiel that I give anytime we talk about branding, make sure that you guys have the same contact information, have your name spelled out the same way, have your photo be the same everywhere that you guys are having that appear. So notice there's a discrepancy here between the photo that I'm using for one home and the photo that I was using for the header and footer. This would actually be a big no-no for branding. If you guys are going to be including any contact information, photos, and stuff like that, the consistency of seeing that same photo everywhere that it's shown is going to increase the likelihood of those clients actually remembering you. So it takes us a little bit of time as humans to memorize something, but repetition is the absolute most important part of that. So if you guys end up seeing the same face over and over and over again, it's very likely you're going to remember that person way better. So do that favor to yourself by making sure that if you guys have the same, if you have an up-to-date photo, make sure that that's appearing everywhere that you guys have a photo of yourself on your professional branding. So your Facebook, your company website, the one home system, the header and footer, RPR, make sure it's all the same. All right, so that's it for our profile information. So again, just to reiterate once more, get in here, get into the settings section, and then hit my information. Get all of that information up to date. We should be good to go. So I'm going to head back to our home page. Now let's talk about our search functions. Now, we don't have to click back to the home page every time. You guys might have noticed up here at the top of the screen, there's this blue bar that's just been traveling with us no matter where we went. There's a basic search function here for the speed bar. We'll be hopefully discussing this at the end of class if we end up having time. This is also covered in our advanced matrix class that we have. If you guys are interested in that, again, can't stress it enough. It's a CE credit class as well. But beyond our basic search function that we have here on the MLS homepage or the speed bar up here at the top, there's also a whole section for searches right up here at the top where we have the blue bar that follows us everywhere. When you hold your cursor over search, we can see that it's actually broken down into a couple different categories. We've got the residential search. This is for any residential sales. We've got the commercial search, again, commercial sales. We have a vacant land for vacant land purchases. And then we have a leasing section, which we could be a little bit more explicit with this, but this is residential leasing. So no commercial or vacant land leasing, it's just residential properties. And in fact, just as a side note, you do have the option of including a residential property as a sale or a lease, depending on what the sellers or potential landlords are interested in actually advertising it. We also have a cross-property search, which is going to be the first one I'm going to pull up here. And this is going to allow us to combine all of those other 4 property types. So when you guys are adding a listing into the system, it has to be added as a residential sale, commercial sale, vacant land sale, or residential lease. The cross-property search allows us to search for a combination of all of those at once. So rather than limiting yourself, if you guys have somebody who's interested in a home, as well as maybe some land to purchase, they can actually get all of that search done in one search. Now, most of the search functions are actually not going to include this property type, and the property subtype list will be a lot more condensed, focused on whatever the property type is. But I like bringing people to this cross-property search, one, because hardly anybody seems to use it, and 2, because this is actually going to show all of the options that you guys might need to see, no matter what property type it is that you guys are going to be searching for primarily. So we can see again our property subtypes where we've got all the different commercial, vacant land, all the residential options. We can see in the center here, we've got a bunch of location-based information. So we've got a map search up at the top, which we'll be covering in the second half of class. We've got a little address search. So instead of using that basic search function on the homepage, we can actually put in a very meticulously entered address right here where we've got the street direction, type, so on and so forth. We've got school district, city, county, zip, township range, and section, especially handy for those of you guys using searches for vacant land. Sometimes they might not have a address, or you might have to actually look for it on the map. But you can also use the township range and section if you guys have the legal description, or even just the township range and section on the tax records. Then finally, we have the subdivision, grade school, middle school, and high school. So for those of you guys looking for buyers that have children and they have a specific school that they're interested in, you guys can actually do a search for properties that have that specific school. So we'll be discussing how to customize a lot of this a little bit more later. But before we get to in the weeds on the actual property search, let's head back up to the search function. So in addition to our 4 categories, as well as the all-in-one, we also have a public record search. This is going to be a tax record search so that you guys don't have to leave Matrix just to find tax record information, which normally would be found in Realist. We also have an agent search. So for those of you guys who may have gotten a call from somebody that you're not as familiar with, and then you're like, oh, you know what, I need to get back in contact with them about their buyer that was interested in my property. You can use this function to actually track people down. It makes it really easy. So for instance, if I had somebody in mind, I can either search by just a name, a first or last name, or if you guys maybe only got a first name, we can search by first name and then just double check which office it was that they said that they were with, and then find out their phone number, their email address. You can even jump into a specific person's profile and then click on My Active Listings to see any of the listings that they have available at the moment. So if somebody had called you about a property that your buyer might be interested in, you can jump in there and actually check, oh, okay, My Active Listings, and see what their listings are. All right. And then finally, we also have a office search that effectively does the exact same thing. Just as a reminder, and we'll be discussing this a couple more times later in class, but there is a wildcard option. So for instance, if I wasn't exactly sure which office it was, maybe they told me they were part of Keller Williams, but they didn't tell me if it was Keller Williams Advantage or Keller Williams Premier or Keller Williams in a specific city, we could just type in Keller and then do an asterisk, which is the wildcard function. And that'll actually show me all of the Keller offices. And then I can find out, oh, that's right. Of course, it was the one here on Ardmore. I can jump into there, and then I can see all of the office agents. And then from there, I can even see, again, their active listings. So effectively, no matter how somebody gets in contact with you, you should be able to get back in contact with them by using the agent or office search. Now, we also have a data co-op search. This one isn't used quite as often as I think it might need to be, but the data co-op allows us to actually see all of the different listings that have been entered into Matrix. Now, when I say Matrix, I don't just mean our version of Matrix that we have specifically for MLS technology. I mean, CoreLogic actually has a database where all of the listings that are entered into their Matrix system, whether it's an MLS in Washington or Texas or Montana, it doesn't matter. If it's entered into a Matrix system, they have the option to actually share their details with us. Now, interestingly enough, we actually have a couple of neighboring associations that are also using Matrix, which means that whenever you guys are in a situation where you need to track down other properties that happen to be of use to a buyer, but maybe they live on the border of the MLS technology area, so like in Arkansas or in Oklahoma City, you guys can use this data co-op to actually track down any listings that have been entered in Matrix. So there is some very explicit utility to this, since we do have some neighboring associations with Matrix. But if you guys are mostly working in the center of our area, or we've also found a lot of people that are not technically in our quote unquote jurisdiction, that just have offices within our MLS to make sure that they can advertise their details. But uh, data co-op does have that little bit of extra utility for those of you guys who are near a border. Finally, we do have a more option down here at the bottom. Now, this is just going to be rehashing most of the buttons that you guys saw on here. We've got all of our basic property searches, the cross property all in one. But down here towards the bottom, we actually have an additional property history search, which I'll show you guys a much easier method too. And then we also have an open house search. So if you guys are interested in doing an open house or finding an open house for a buyer that you're working with, you can use that open house search down at the bottom. All right. Now, one thing I wanted to note while we're actually looking at this particular screen, whenever you click on the search button or click on the more button at the bottom of the search menu, it brings us to this space where we can see pretty explicitly we've got a quick res, which is going to be the quick residential search, and then create your own. Now, each section, each property type actually has their own collection. So land, create your own. Lease, create your own. Quick cross property, create your own. Now, each of these is actually going to be found under the drop-down for that menu. So we've got residential, quick res, create your own. So there's some different ways to get to the exact same place. Now you may notice when I'm looking at my list, I have a quick res and a quick X prop or cross property search already added to my menu so that I don't even have to go into the sub menu to find it. This is something that's going to happen just due to sheer usage. So I kept going back into the residential quick search. So it just added that to my menu so that I could quickly and easily get back into it later. If you guys are trying to increase the likelihood of it adding that to your menu, like for instance, if you guys are using vacant land frequently, but again, you're new to the system, you can just quickly jump in there, click on it several times, and it'll eventually end up landing on your menu. Now, let's take a look at the basic residential search. Since this is the one that almost everybody in the system uses on a almost everyday basis, this is the one that we're going to spend the most time in. Now, as we mentioned before, we have a property subtype section over here on the left. Notice when we were in the cross property search, it was a massive list and there was a couple extra options for like if we wanted residential or vacant land. All of that's been stripped away so that our search is a lot more focused now on just the residential properties. The only thing that's actually going to be added as a default criteria is going to be active. Now, the reason this is because when you guys first land on the search, the expectation is that you guys are looking for a property for a buyer. Now, everything else on here, at least by default, is going to be empty. This means that we can add in a school district that we're interested in, or what subtype, or what price range, et cetera, et cetera. But all of that is going to still be funneled through the lens of this active listing. Now, on the center section here, where we've got our location search, there is one thing that we need to cover. It's this subdivision, grade school, middle, high school. When you guys are landing on this page, this is going to be especially important to use the wildcard search. So subdivision is a perfect example. So let's say that I was looking for the Eagle Ridge Estates. So that's the actual name of the subdivision, is the Eagle Ridge Estates. Now, when I first go into my search, maybe I forgot that it was the Eagle Ridge Estates, or maybe it was the Eagle Ridge Estates resub 12, parcel 5, whatever. This subdivision section allows us to add in a wildcard at the beginning and end, which means that if it's the Eagle Ridge, if I just put in Eagle Ridge with no other criteria, no wildcard functions, it's not going to find it because it had the at the beginning. Since that wasn't how I started this search, it's not going to find it. The same thing goes at the end. So for instance, the Eagle Ridge Estates, the is already taken care of, estates doesn't matter. Now, this could also be especially important for those of you guys working with the subdivisions that have a ton of different resubs or amendments and additions and so on and so forth. So Minchell Park here in Tulsa is kind of notorious for that. There is a Minchell Park that's just the original. There's like maybe 100 properties there. But if you do a search for all of the Minchell Park properties and actually even use the map to narrow it down, there's like 700 or 800 properties there. So having that wildcard function is going to help you guys make sure that you find all of the results that you need. It's just especially important for subdivision, but it also applies to the school district, or not the school district, excuse me, the schools that are available. Whereas the rest of this location stuff isn't going to be quite as complicated. So let's actually first address this school district section since we just talked about the schools. If you guys are searching for, let's say, the Ada school district, I can type in ADA and notice how it automatically just chooses the first option. If I wanted to actually get Adair, I would actually have to finish out the word, but notice it automatically chooses that selection instead now. So this little typed search section does allow us to just type in where we want it to go, and that'd be it. We also have the option of adding in multiple school districts by just putting in a comma. And then let's say I wanted to get the neighboring school district for Ada, which is LATA. I'm gonna type in LATTA, and that brings me down here. So now I've got both of these selected. I scroll all the way back up to the top. Got Ada and LATA. Yeah, there we go. Now, this might not be the only restriction that you guys would like to add. Maybe we wanted to make sure that we only got properties that were in Ada proper. We can combine those two. Notice we have 24 matches. If I take away the city, oh, still only the 24. Let's take away LATA. Oh, that took 3. Oh, there we go. So there's a variety of ways you guys can combine those. In addition to just typing them out or having to scroll down the very, very massive list, there is also a little search function. When you guys click on the little icon to the right here, which is available for school, city, county, and zip code, it brings up a little pop-up menu. I'm going to zoom this in so we can actually read it. There we go. And this allows us to run our search, which is going to actually do something a little different. So when I type in Ada, notice how instead of it automatically selecting it, I actually get the option to click on it. And then there's an add or remove button that allows me to take this listing or this entry and add it over to my current selection. Do the same thing here for LATA. Go, select it, add. When I click on OK, it brings me back to the screen where I can see that it's now added the official terminology for the school district name. But I can have those added in that way, the same way that I can do with our city option. There we go. All right. Now, that's it for our location section. We're going to be spending a lot on the map search a little later, but what I want to do for now is just pull up a regular old search. So over here on the right-hand side, I've got a price section. Now there's a couple different ways for us to enter information, but you'll notice everything that I'm going to be doing in this field is going to automatically turn into the thousands. There's a little checkbox over here to the right that actually allows us to make sure that that's happening. So notice it's actually just adding in 3 zeros, and that's going to take whatever the numbers are that I put in here into the thousands for me. Now, that means that whenever I put in 200 to 350, it'll convert that to the thousands so that you guys don't have to type quite as much. Now, the ranges are going to be fairly simple. So for instance, if I have a client that doesn't really want anything that's too low, but he also has a hard budget of 350, we can give them a range for them to work with. Or what we can do is actually say, I want 250 plus. And what that means is that it's going to find any properties that are 250,000 or more. So that little plus is actually going to automatically assume that I want this or higher. That's going to be especially important when we get to our bedrooms, because we can actually put in our bedrooms the same way and even do our bathrooms the same way. Now, if we wanted to say that we had a hardline budget, so like, again, a client that tells us, look, we can't go over financing on 350, but don't remove properties just because the price is low. You know, maybe we might get a deal out of it, or we can invest some money in improvements or whatever. So I've got a hardline budget option here where we just put in a minus after the price, and that'll make sure that any properties that are that or lower will actually be added in. So notice right now we've got 754 matches. In case you guys haven't been watching this little ticker down here at the bottom, this is actually showing us a live count of how many properties actually match our criteria as we enter them. So notice now I've got 250 or less with 3 plus 2 plus. I've got 510 matches. Now it's important to note that whenever we go to our results from here, again, with just those very basic pieces of information, it's actually finding things here. We've got Ada, Adair, Allen Bowden, Ardmore, Bartlesville. The information that we've actually tracked down with that search, because we didn't add in a location restriction, it's finding properties from all over the map. This is important to realize because you may end up in a situation where you have a client asking for something, and by the time you guys start running your search, you realize that the properties that are available for them are literally all over the map, including one down here in Texas, apparently. Well, this is mapped wrong. You know what, before we get too far, there we go. All right. We're going to be talking about this a little bit more later, but just wanted to make sure I got a note of that. Okay, let me head back. So again, when we ran our search, it just found anything and everything. So it wasn't even necessarily keeping track of where it was located. So that's part of the reason why whenever you guys are going through and running your search, get your criteria put in, whether or not it has garage capacity or pool, how many acres, so on and so forth. But you may also want to either narrow it down using some of the location search functions or by using the map, which we'll cover in a bit here. But I'm going to go ahead and narrow down my subdivision search even further. We're going to do, or not subdivisions, excuse me, school. We're going to do the Bixby School District. There we go. I got 4 matches. So I'm going to head over to my map just to make sure that I did actually find only the property area that I was interested in. All right. And then head over to results as well. You don't have to follow that specific path, but as we just saw, there is always the chance that something got mismapped, but also you might want to just double check that we actually found the right area, especially if you guys are running a search for a subdivision. Now, once we're on to our real results, you'll notice that unlike the search that we ran when we were running that search on the homepage where it was finding properties that were closed and expired and released and so on, this time again, we're only finding the properties that are active. Remember, that was the only criteria that's a base default option whenever you get to a search, is that it says active. So here we are looking at properties that are currently for sale. None of them are going to go over the 250,000 budget that we set. And we can actually click on those listing numbers to learn more about each of the individual listings themselves. Now, when we click on those, it's going to bring us to a whole page. We're going to visit that a lot more in a minute here. Let's talk about this search results screen first. So we've got our listing number where we can get in to find out more about it. We've got a view photos button, which allows us to see what the property looks like. Just as a reminder, especially for those of you guys who are new, the primary photo of listings, if you guys are going to upload a photo at all, which just as a reminder is not necessarily required unless it's an auction property. But if you guys do want to upload a photo, the photo has to be a primary photo of the front exterior of the property or an aerial shot of the property. So it has to have that. That is a violation if you guys don't include that. But anytime you guys upload photos to a listing, primary photo has to be the front exterior of the property. All right. So you can click on those view photos options to kind of dive in there and learn more about it really quickly. There's also a button down here at the bottom that allows you to see the total photos for the property and then jump into a specific one using that specific thumbnail. Now, you may notice in this case, these are actually renderings of the property. So it's just trying to show you what the property will look like. Now, as I mentioned before, if you guys are going to upload a photo, it has to have a front exterior shot of the house. In this case, this is not the exact house that the person is going to be buying. This is just a representation of it, which according to our rules and regulations is actually allowed. So you guys are aware. All right, so that's our photo button. We also have a view map button. The view map option is actually going to find this particular listing and show a map that shows effectively just a contextual view of that particular property. This allows me to zoom in and out. It's got a option to go to the satellite or to switch back to the map and add the terrain. Oh, I clicked on add terrain and nothing happened because would you look at that, it's Oklahoma. It's very flat. Okay, we also have a layers option. So for instance, if you did have a client that maybe they had a bad experience with the floods back in 2019, and so they're like paranoid about that, you can click on that little map button and then go to the layers option here and add either the FEMA flood zones, which allows us to see, oh, looks like this one's in a 100-year flood plain, actually pretty close to the 500-year flood plain. What? Down in Bixby? I'll be honest, I didn't realize that this whole area was a floodplain. Well, so maybe this property might not be of interest in the example that I just gave. Anyway, so we've got the flood options added. Again, all of this information is coming over from FEMA directly. For those of you guys who were working in Tulsa County, we also have a Tulsa flood zone. This is only going to be available for Tulsa County. If we were to zoom out a little further, zoom back in, make sure we can see Tulsa. We can see the Tulsa flood zones. And again, these are actually being added due to, well, actually pretty explicitly the 2019 floods. There was a need for us to double check what the flood zones were according to local estimates rather than just relying on the FEMA information, which sometimes didn't give enough specificity to an area. Anyway, so again, that's our map option. Now, coincidentally, the map option does the exact same thing that the address option does. If you guys click on the address, it's going to end up pulling up that exact same map option. Now, over here to the far right, we have a couple extra icons. So when we're going through, we've got, again, our listing number, photos, map. We see what the status is, property subtype, school district, address, BR bedroom, FB full bath, HB half bath, garage capacity, year built, square footage, price, and then these unlabeled ones are actually going to be the history of the property, starting a transaction in transaction desk, the documents that the listing agent had initially uploaded, which is where you guys are going to be putting in your disclosures. Now, you do not have to, this is something that we get asked questions about very frequently. If you guys are unsure about the upload documents via transaction desk option, whenever you guys are first adding the disclosures to your listing, you do not have to sign on for using transaction desk as your transaction system. It's just a storage space for your documents to be stored for the listings itself. Next icon over, which unfortunately looks like we don't have anything filled in here. This is where you guys are going to find the virtual tour option. And then the next one over is going to be the open house. Now the icons are going to be pretty obvious. If there was a virtual tour on this particular property, it'll look like a little film reel. And then the open house option literally just looks like a door being opened, which actually coincidentally is this icon right down here. So, and actually I've navigated away from my search that I just made. So I'm going to click on recent searches and just jump back into the one that I was just looking at. There we go. Now, the final icon that we see on here is actually the RPR icon. or the realtor property resource. Now, beyond even just getting access to the history of a property, which is just going to show the details for the history within our own listing details, so anything that was added into Matrix and our MLS, RPR is actually going to be able to find all of the property's information from several different sources even. So for instance, if I wanted to find out what the quality of life was here in this particular property, I can click on the Realtor Property Resource. It's going to open up a report in the National Association of Realtors official app. And what that actually is going to provide me is a huge, huge wealth of information. We've got tax record details. We've got information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics to find out how many people are unemployed in that area, or what the weather is like how much rainfall, how many days of sunshine, the AARP livability index showing how good any of the services are that are in that area, like health, air quality, so on and so forth. There's a whole bunch of details that you guys can find in here. If I wanted to find out what the quality of life was like, I click on neighborhood. The reports and details that you guys can find in this particular function is just vast. I mean, it's, in my opinion, probably the most important thing that you guys have access to as realtors. We do have a CE credit class that covers how to use RPR. I can't stress enough how important it is to learn more about this, because it's going to help you guys out immensely in buying property, selling property, so on and so forth. Those reports are fantastic. But it also makes you guys the lightning rod for any questions that clients have, which is probably the most useful function inside it, is that if you do end up having a client that's maybe asking a lot of questions about things that maybe you don't have immediate access to or immediate knowledge of, you guys can just pull up that RPR app, find the information, and deliver it to them with a lot more authority and accuracy than they might be able to track down on, let's say, Zillow or Trulia or wherever else they're trying to go to find information. So keep in mind those little icons over there. When we end up opening up the listing details by clicking on the MLS number, you'll notice that a lot of those same icons are actually now going to be shuffled under the photo for the property. So even if you guys have been looking at a particular address in the past and you guys are like, oh, you know what, I want to learn more about this particular property or the neighborhood or whatever, there's that little RPR icon down here at the bottom. Now there are some extra icons that were just added. Now we've got the photos, the map, and the history. Coincidentally, we've got tax record information, photos, history, and a parcel map and a flood map. Now, these tabs up here at the top are going to match the information that we can find down here at the bottom. The tax information, we can quickly jump into the realist details with those little black icons. But instead of having to switch which app I'm actually looking at, I can just click on the tax button. This shows me all of the information imported from realist into the format that Matrix likes to display it in. One of the notable omissions from the tax details is going to be the previous sales and sales history. That's missing from here just because this is going to be primarily focused on the parcels details. Whereas if we go to history, this is going to be what the history view looks like whenever we click that little clock icon. And we can see in here, we've got a couple different listings recently, one that was added last year. They took it off the market for a while. Then we've got the previous listing even before that, back in 2008. You can see that because it's got a 6-digit MLS number. Another one in 2007 where they didn't add a photo. And then down here towards the bottom, this is where the sales information from all sales transactions for this property can be found. Now, interestingly enough, this is actually going to show us not just anything that went through the MLS, it's also going to be showing us any tax record information as well, including when Linda apparently paid $2,000 for the property, which is kind of nice. It seems like she got a good bang for her buck at some point. Anyway, down here at the bottom, we also have the mortgage history information. Again, all of this is public records, but you have quick and easy access to it through the history option. The parcel map section is going to be broken down into 3 different sections. We've got a satellite view, parcel dimensions view, and then down here at the bottom, just like we saw when we clicked on the map icon or when we click on the address itself, there's going to be a little map section here that allows us to add in extra layers and just contextualize where it is that we're looking. So like if you weren't familiar with where this particular property was, we could be like, all right, oh, hey, look, that's Mingo, Mingo and 171st. So I'm at 41st right now. I'm just going to have to go down Mingo until I hit 171st, blah, 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 blah. So it's a nice contextual map. We also have a flood map section. So instead of adding in the flood zones explicitly on that previous map that we have a whole section here that's devoted just to the flood information. And you notice this even shows us the code that the FEMA designation represents. Okay. We can see all of that information up here at the top. And again, all of this is coming over from FEMA and the tax records. All right. Now let's head back to that listing tab because actually it might be, you know what, let's do our break before we actually cover this information. So what I'm going to do, we're going to take our break now, and I will see you guys back here at 10:06 or 10:07, excuse me. We'll do 10:07. So we'll take a 10-minute break. When we get back, we're going to cover some more about the listings, and then we're going to start talking about how to use the map search function. So I will see you guys back here in a bit. I'm going to put the video back on the screen. And if you guys have any questions in the interim, don't hesitate to give us a little question in the Q&A option. But we will see you guys back here in 10 minutes. If you hear the music go away, that's us resuming class, by the way. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started again. So we left off by running a quick search. I can head back to my criteria here to double check. All right, I got Bixby, I got the price, I got the bedroom, bathroom. So I'm going to head back to my results. When you guys are on the results page, you can click on the MLS number to open a particular listing. If you need to return back to the page where you had multiple results, you can click on this option up here at the top that says single line display. When you click on that, it brings you back. You can click on a different listing. You also have the option to move between listings using this previous and next button up here at the top. So we can move between those to find which listing it was that we wanted to learn more about. So we'll stop on this one here. So we've got a property here with some of the basic details showing up here at the top. We've got its public remarks. This is the information that will actually get syndicated out to Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, et cetera, et cetera. Further down, we have some more intimate details about the property, the counters, the exteriors, whether it has gutters, where the water is coming from, how the heating is done in the house, whether it's a gas or central or both. There's also going to be a section that may or may not actually have been filled out by the listing agent, where it shows the additional rooms. There's a little icon here to expand or contract this section. Just so you guys are aware, this may actually be crucial information for some buyer somewhere. The best example I can give is actually a very personal one. My mom is arthritic. She has some pretty significant problems with moving up and down stairs. She's still ambulatory, obviously, but it's not ideal to be going up and down stairs every day. So whenever she was looking for houses, she was actually specifically targeting houses that weren't necessarily only one story, but she did need to make sure that the master bedroom and that there was a bathroom and so on and so forth on the first floor. So when you guys are constructing a search, you can actually include master bedroom has to be on the first floor, and maybe even include some description to it, like whether or not it has a private bathroom or whether there's a walk-in closet. All of those details can actually be added into the additional rooms section. And even though it might not be required, I would strongly suggest that you guys actually include that on all of your listings if at all possible. If only just for that one buyer out there who's looking for their, perfect house, but they can't find it because their instructions are actually including that the agent has to find whether the master bedroom is on the first floor. If it's not included, finding it's going to be next to impossible, or they're going to have to go through and research every single listing that they find that happens to match the rest of their criteria, which can also be cumbersome for the agent. So save yourselves and any of your fellow agents some time by adding in all of the details that you can. Occasionally we see people that put other or none on all of these options, and that's just bad data. But anyway, a little further down, we got some basic information about the HOA, whether there's any fees associated with it, pets allowed, etc. Some warranty, finance information. And then finally, we have a whole section down here at the bottom that's going to be just for realtors. Now, that's going to come back into play in a little bit here because, lo and behold, there is a lot of information that we actually provide to you guys that's meant only for other MLS members. This means that this is not information that's going to be fed out to the public, like whether or not what type of listing agreement is, what the compensation amounts are, who to get in contact. There's even sometimes where we'll have brokers that have put in showing instructions or something in the broker remarks that's explicitly giving codes to gates and things like that. So if you guys end up in a situation where you're needing to share that kind of data, you should put it into a place that's only going to be visible to other agents and not something that's going to be syndicated out to the public like the public remarks would be, for instance. Now, back up here to the top, we mentioned that there was a tax section. We've already discussed a little bit about how this is going to show a lot of the details about the tax records that the property has, I wanted to point out that the tax information is going to only appear in one of two different ways. We're either going to have access to it because the exact address was being used for the listing, or it might be appearing because down here at the bottom where it's got the tax information, the listing agent might have added the tax parcel number. Now, if you guys do end up noticing that the tax tab is missing, that doesn't necessarily mean that there was no tax record for this property. It may just mean that Realist couldn't find it based on the address, or the agent didn't provide that tax parcel number. You may still have to go in and track it down using either the public record search or that Realist tax search that we have a class on. All right, so that's it for our review of the listing details. Let's actually head back, and we're going to be taking a look now again at the search function here, where we have all of our results. Again, just as a reminder, we have each of these little links that goes to a specific spot. So this to history option opens up a new window. So for instance, if maybe you guys came across a listing and you were like, wait a second, is this the one that I saw recently? You can click on this to history option, check out the details about this particular property, and go back to that tab without having to get into this and then click on history. And then, okay, that's not the one I was looking for. I go back to my single line display and click on a different listing and notice it's still in the history tab. So I just like having that option when we're on the results page. If you guys need to just quickly open up the history of a property without having to navigate within that listing's details, you can quickly access that here. Same thing goes with the view documents option. It's going to open up a new tab, and it's going to show us all the details about that, again, without having me navigate into the listing details itself. All right, so now let's actually talk about the map search functionality. This is, in my opinion, one of the most important things. I also think that this is going to stress to you guys why it is that you need to make sure that all of your listings are mapped correctly. I am still surprised whenever we find, I mean, like that one I found earlier, I'm just going to immediately report it to the agent. If you do end up having a listing that was entered into the system, double check that it's mapped correctly. That's a fairly simple process. We even have a YouTube video that shows how to correct that stuff if you guys do find that it's incorrect. And Sherry's got a question. Regarding pictures, does adding new pictures after publishing the initial listing create a new listing, or updating listing notifications or alerts? I don't know that there's going to be any notifications or alerts, but the good news is that whenever you add in photos or update photos or whatever the case may be to a listing after it's already been made active, all of those photos will be syndicated out to Zillow, Trulia, etc. They may take a little bit longer than when you had initially added the listing into the system because they don't check as frequently for the photos that have been added. But if you do end up adding stuff, it'll typically take maybe a day or so before it actually shows up everywhere else. If you are uploading photos after, so I think there's even a listing on here that said pro photos are coming next. Oh yeah, here we go. Pro photos coming soon. So after they've actually updated the photos, maybe make a different change to the listing details. So like, you know, if there's a price or something, change the price or change the other details on here, maybe something else that was missing. And it'll actually send out a notification to any of the interested buyers that have this as an auto email. But we're going to talk about that auto email function a little bit later. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, adding photos isn't going to notify anybody. You'll have to make another change to the listing in order to do so. All right, so let's head back to just an empty search. So I'm going to do a quick residential search. And I'm going to add in just a couple details. So I'm going to do 350 minus, we're going to do 4+ bedrooms, we're going to do 3+ bathrooms. So a larger property this time. Now, as I've gone through and added these, we noticed it went from the 2000 listings down to 101 matches. I'm going to use this map search function. And this is going to show me all of the properties that it's actually been able to find. Now, when I zoom into a specific area, say that I was looking for down here in Durant, if I just wanted to include the Durant and Kingston area, so not over here with the Buckcheeto, we can actually just use one of these drawing tools up here at the top. Now, the basic one is going to be the radius option. So I can just click in the center of the area that I'm interested in, draw a radius, and I'm good to go. You also have the option of doing a rectangle. So for instance, if I just wanted to do Medill to just outside of Durant, all the way down to Calera, we can add that on there. And notice what ended up happening is that as soon as we drew on the map, notice our number of results, it was showing 101 up here at the top, but now it actually just shows 4 of 4. Even if I switch over to my results, because I drew on the map, I'm only seeing the 4 results that it was able to find. Now, if I need to get rid of any shapes that I've drawn, I can hold my cursor over the red dot and then do delete shape. We can do the exact same thing with other options as well. So we've got radius, we've got a rectangle. There's also a polygon option. So for instance, if you guys wanted to just get the southern portion of the state without going into Texas, just kind of do a little drawing. Think of this like the pins on like a, I don't know if you guys have seen those movies with the conspiracy theorists, and they have the pin board where they've just added on a bunch of pins. Think of this as effectively that line that you're drawing with the string and the pins. Each click is a pin, and that'll solidify the string on its way to the next pin. So notice how it just locks into place all of this as soon as I click. And then once you're done with the shape, just drag that string onto the last pin or the first pin that you put in and tie it off. So it makes it really easy to kind of customize a search. Another example that I really like to use is the version of Midtown that my wife likes to use. So her version of Midtown is just a little bit different than what other people might call it. So Midtown to her looks like this. So I'm going to use pin, click, pin, so on. There we go. Oop. Click all the way up to here and over to here. Perfect. Now, of course, this might not be what your vision is, or it might just be some weird version of the search that your client is interested in, where they don't want to be south of this road, but they don't want to be north of that road, only go this far east or west or whatever. You can also make adjustments to this after the fact. And this is part of the reason why I recommend the regular polygon option, is because if you click on one of these corners, you can move it. And if you end up clicking on the empty space in between 2 pins, so I've got 1 pin down here, I've got 1 pin up here. If I click in between those, it actually adds in a new pin or a new corner. So I can actually move this further. If I want to move the whole line, I can click and drag on the corners. If I want to actually add some shape to it, we click on the center of the line. We can add in that final corner. Now, I do have, again, that red button to allow me to delete the shape. In this case, I'm actually going to click on this clear all shapes option. Kind of looks like an eraser. That'll get rid of all the shapes there. Now, instead of using the polygon tool, this time I'm actually going to use the freehand polygon. This is effectively just a pen. So I can just click and drag, and it's following my cursor as I go. So even if I'm doing weird shapes, it'll still track. As soon as I let go, it's just going to pinch off the rest of the shape and solidify that into my search. Now, part of the reason why I prefer the regular polygon versus the freehand option is because there's no telling where it is that each of these lines are. So whenever you start clicking, it might drag from a certain spot, and then there's way more corners for you to have to adjust if you do end up wanting to make something line up with things. So it's available, it's useful if you guys are extremely good with your clicking and dragging, but otherwise you may end up in a situation where you've got these weird shapes that are unmanageable. So click that clear shape, click the polygon, click, 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 oops. There we go. A little bit easier. Same basic idea, much easier to manage and also much easier to manipulate as well if we needed to make changes. Now, that's all well and good, but whenever we're on the map, let's say that we're talking about that same client earlier that was worried about the floods. So I can go to the map, and instead of using any of these shapes to narrow down my search, maybe they liked this area down here south of 71st, but north of 101st or 101st, around that Sheridan area. So I'm going to actually click on this layers button, and I can add in the Tulsa flood zones since I'm in the Tulsa county. But notice how it's actually not allowing me to add on the FEMA flood zones. I need to zoom in, and that's actually what the red is meant to indicate. So I can't see parcels, I can't see flood maps because I need to zoom in. As soon as I zoom in closer, a little closer, there we go. Now I should be able to access it. FEMA flood zones. Okay, so actually it looks like in this area down here, it doesn't look like they're close to anything that might flood. So I think we should be set. So if I wanted to, I can zoom back out. Notice the flood map disappears after you zoom too far out, but I can actually add in my little search function here and only get those 6 results. Now, if you do end up having a client that has multiple areas that they would like for us to search, you have the option to add in multiple different shapes. So it's worth mentioning if you guys would like to add shapes to this, they don't have to be contiguous. And in fact, there's even options there where it says exclude this shape or include intersection only. You notice this actually flips it around so that it's only going to be searching the areas where it overlaps with other shapes. If you guys have a couple different shapes, you can do that. Or if you guys wanted to, I'm going to clear all my shapes off. If I added in a layer that was my FEMA flood zones, and I wanted to ensure that I'm not seeing any of the properties that are within the flood zone, I can zoom in to where the flood zones are appearing, draw my shape over the flood zone area that I don't want. There we go. And I can do exclude this shape. And what exclude this shape does is it says anything within the confines of this shape that I've drawn are not going to be included. So for instance, again, if we had an area that maybe they didn't want to live, so like they don't want to live near the thoroughfare because they just don't like that amount of noise, just draw a shape there and do exclude this shape. Notice it gets rid of the properties along that route. Now, of course, this isn't an ideal example because there's always a possibility that you've accidentally moved it over the pin of a property that's actually not close to the thoroughfare, but it's just an idea for you. I've seen people use it this way. And in fact, this is something that my wife and I would take into consideration because she grew up in Stigler, which was a very quiet, sleepy little town. So not a lot of noise. It'll keep her up at night. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it for our maps. So I'm going to head back to our criteria one more time. So just to clarify where we're at, we've added in a price, bedroom, bathroom. Let's do a school district just so that we have something. We'll do Broken Arrow. Oh, we've got one match. How about Bixby? You know what? 2 is fine. I'll just work with that. All right, so I'm going to head to our results. I've got 2 different properties on here. Over on the left-hand side, to the left of the actual MLS number itself, there's going to be a little checkbox option. Now, when you click on the checkbox, you'll notice that a bunch of the actions that were previously blacked out down here at the bottom, that just weren't available. We couldn't click on them. If we tried to, it would say you must check at least one item. That's going to be those checkboxes over here on the left. As soon as we check one of those, we have all of these options down here at the bottom. Starting over at the left, we have the email option. So once we've found a listing that's actually of interest to a client that we're working with, we can check that checkbox and then do email. Now, the email process is fairly simple. We've got an option to just type in their email address right up here at the top. So if I just wanted to put that in there, and that was all I was interested in, we can add that and be done with it. Just send off something with a subject and an email body, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. But I'll be honest, I don't think this is the ideal way to do things anymore. Now that we have the one home interface where clients can actually go and run complicated searches or simple searches or save favorites, et cetera, I would strongly recommend that you guys actually use this create a new contact option. It's very simple. All you need is just first, last, and email address. If you're already going to be emailing them something, very likely you already know their first name, maybe even their last name, but you certainly have their email address already. But what this is actually going to allow them to do is anytime you guys send something off to them, you'll be able to keep track of that from the perspective of them being a client or a contact in the system. So you can see all of the emails that you've sent out. You can set up specific auto email functions so that if there was an area that they were particularly interested in, they could effectively just get into that particular area by clicking on a link in your email. There's a variety of different ways. We'll talk about a couple of those in just a moment here, but everything is going to be based on whether or not they are a contact or whether you just sent off a one-time email to whatever the email address was. So instead of just sending it off, create a new contact, and that way you guys can have a lot more interaction from them in the future. Beyond that, it's very simple. Somebody just asked, is there training available on OneHome? Yes, in fact, I think we actually have a video on our YouTube channel for that. Let me double check. MLS technology. And we are the first result. I believe we have something about OneHome on here. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a fairly simple one. This is actually going to be more focused on what it looks like from the perspective of the client, which is going to be the person that actually uses it. But I think there's more videos. I'm going to have to double check to see if there's some extra content that we can add. That's actually a good reminder. Thank you, Sherry. I'm going to double check to see if they have any other videos on that. But it's a system that, if I'm being honest, I think there wouldn't necessarily need to be training on, but it might be beneficial to actually just send yourself something just so you can see what it looks like. I'm a very tactile learner. If I can get my hands on something, I can learn how to use it. If somebody just tries to talk at me about things, sometimes it goes over my head. Typically, in webinars like this, I would actually just be following along. But not that you guys have to. That's just how I happen to learn. So I appreciate that you're wanting to kind of glean some information from what we have available, no matter what. I do also know, oh, you know what? I know where they have some extra training. Under the Matrix Learning Lab. You can learn more about Matrix and also OneHome. They actually have a huge amount of information on here. I didn't get too deep into this one just because, I'll be honest, at this point, I'm a power user. But I did spend a lot of time on my account, at least, working through the OneHome Ready and OneHome Expert side of things. So I would recommend those as well. Excellent. All right. So let's now interact with some of our listings a little deeper. I'm going to jump back to a search that we did earlier. Actually, you know what? Yeah, let's just use one of my saved searches. All right. So I've got a listing. If I wanted to send this off, I can email it to a client. We also have a button here for printing things. Now, if you guys do end up wanting to print off a report, there's a variety of different options. Any of these My options we're going to cover in just a minute. Those will be connected to how you guys can customize the search results page. But you'll notice whenever I'm trying to print something, I've got some options here to print either an agent view or a client view. Now, I mentioned earlier that whenever you're looking at listing data in Matrix, there's actually going to be a whole section of information that's literally just details that are meant for agents and MLS members. So the compensation percentages, what kind of contract it is that the client has with the listing agent, all of those details are actually not important to the buyer's side, the client side, at least not initially. And so subsequently, we have two different categories of reports, the agent version and the client version, that allow you guys to just trust that, all right, I'm going to be sending them the client version of this report. It's going to show them only the information that they need in order to make a decision on whether to buy the property. Whereas the agent side of things is going to be more for if you guys needed to keep a record of the listings that you guys went to show, if you guys wanted to print some stuff off about the listing to add to the client's file, whatever the case may be, just make sure that you guys are only putting in reports or only sending reports to the individuals that should be receiving them. So the agent side of things can only be viewed by other MLS members, for instance. Now, a little further down, we also have some reports that can only be run as PDFs. These are the quick CMA options. We're going to circle back around to those in just a minute here. But if you guys do end up wanting to send something out, we can do client summary. We can email that, print it, preview it, or send it straight to the printer. Now, if I want to see what this is going to look like, I strongly recommend that you guys use this print to PDF option. It'll allow you guys to make sure that all of these custom settings over here on the right are actually combined together in a way that's going to make it useful information for you. So now that I have a report pulled up, notice I've got my customized header up here at the top. I've got my search criteria showing down here at the bottom, and then I've got my footer even further down. So this is the last piece of information on this page. If I try to print this off, this is all that's going to appear. When I go back to my email option, you notice we've got print header and footer. We can choose if we only wanted the header, only wanted the footer, both, or neither. We also have an option to choose whether or not we wanted to do first page or last page for the header and footer, or if we just wanted it to appear at the top and bottom of every page. There's an option here. I usually recommend people to click on this client full. There's a button for print with rollouts, if any, open. When I do the print with rollouts, you'll notice that that section that we saw earlier that has the actual rooms that were added to the listing, those will all appear. If I choose not to include that, so like if I uncheck this checkbox, even uncheck this option for search criteria, the printout on that is not going to include the rooms. Notice that section is just missing. And then the search criteria is also missing now as well. So try to customize these as best as you might be interested. I recommend just checking the checkbox for print with rollouts and then just leaving it at that. The search criteria I think is also helpful. I mean, at least on my part, if I'm receiving something from someone that's supposedly showing me results for a search that they've done, being able to recreate that search is something that's very valuable to me. So it might be interesting to do that. But if you guys notice, if you're printing only a selection of those listings, showing the search criteria that you used might actually mean that they're going to be trying to run that exact same search. And if you manually chose only a couple properties to send to them, they may just take a look at the raw numbers of results and be like, I don't know, this actually, it doesn't seem like the realtor found as many of the properties as I was able to find. And that could undercut your value, but you can also point out to them you're using your real estate expertise to try and narrow down and curate the listings that you're sending to them. But neither here nor there. I'm going to head back to results. We also have a CMA button. This is something that we cover in our CMAs and Matrix class. It's a full report option. There's a whole guide on how to get through this, but we're going to skip over that for now. We have a directions button. This is especially important if you guys are actually trying to navigate to a bunch of properties. So for instance, if I had done a search where I had multiple properties that I'd found, and I wanted to navigate in between all of them, I can check the checkbox to select everything or hit the All button up here at the top and then click on Directions. Now, this is effectively just going to produce a MapQuest style report. So up here at the top, we can see the order of the properties. And then a little further down, it gives us those old MapQuest style guidance to the property in question. It's worth noting, if you guys want to start in a specific spot, so like let's say I wanted to start at ORU, go find stop. So it got the custom stop added. When I click on directions again down here at the bottom, it may end up rearranging some of these, but it looks like that actually is the best path for us to view all of these. And then we can even add a stop at the end. But the good news is it's got all of the instructions on there. If we wanted to print this out or email it to a client, whatever the case may be, we can hit those buttons down there at the bottom. This isn't as necessary as it used to be, but I did want to bring up this directions option, if only for those of you guys who are using the MLS for vacant land listings. Again, hopefully the listing agent has actually mapped the property correctly, but if they have, instead of having to worry about, well, this is vacant land, it doesn't have an address, there's no 911 address, blah, 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 blah. You just click that directions button, add in a stop, and you'll be guided right to where you need to go. All right. We have a stats option. We covered this in our advanced matrix class. We're not going to be discussing it today. Export is another option where you guys can actually take the details from this particular search function. And what it'll do is it'll actually create a CSV file, which is something that you can open in Excel. I'm trying to think of what the Google equivalent is. Sheets, I think is what it's called. Like worksheet. Anyway, if you guys work with spreadsheets at all in any program, you guys can use that export function to kind of construct a little bit different layout or even do mail merges if you wanted. We also have a quick CMA button. Now the quick CMA button is actually a really useful tool. So if I wanted to gather a bunch of information about the houses in this area really quickly, I'm gonna actually expand this out, depending closed, go. Oh. Let's do last 30 days. I forgot if I'm gonna do a CMA, I need to have a relatively narrow range. There we go. So I'm gonna hop in here. I see all of my active, pending, closed, etc. I'm gonna click on the all button. So notice right now, if I just check the checkbox up at the top of this page, it's only going to check the items that are on this particular page. If I go to page 2 of my search results, I don't see anything else checked. I can either manually check each of those again, or check the checkbox that selects everything at once. Now, the quick CMA option is just an easy button to just get a nice professional report created really quickly. It dumps all of my actives together into a category, all of my pendings into a category together, and all of my closed into a category together. And then down at the very, very bottom, it shows us the totals for all of the listings, active, pending, and closed. And then the quick statistics down here at the bottom. The other thing that I wanted to mention while we're looking at this page, just hit that raise hand button if you guys happen to know this off the top of your head. What does DOM or CDOM stand for? If you happen to know it, hit that raise hand button. I won't unmute you. I just wanted to see how many people actually know this stuff. So the DOM is the, yeah, Janet, I was about to say, I'm sure you know this. DOM stands for days on market, and CDOM is cumulative days on market. Now, the days on market is actually meant to indicate to you how many days this particular listing has actually stayed on the market. The cumulative days on market is actually going to be tracking how long that property has actually stayed on the market. So let's see if we can find any discrepancies between these. Oh, here we go. At least a couple of them. where we have 19 days that this particular listing has been on the market, but it looks like it may have been in a different listing at a certain point in time and subsequently got an extra day of cumulative days on market. Same thing goes with this pending here. It was 4 days that this listing was on the market, 6 days that that property was for sale. So easy peasy. All right. Now we also have a couple extra sections down here at the bottom. We're just going to rattle through these really quick. The refine option is actually going to be related to the contacts that I've mentioned earlier. So again, in order to create a new contact, the only thing that you guys actually have to have is first name, last name, and email address. Now, once we start sending things off to people, you'll notice that you may end up sending multiple items to a person, or excuse me, sending a listing to people multiple times. It may not always be that you've actually explicitly chosen that listing and chosen to send it to them again. But if you guys want to double check to see what you have already emailed to them, you can actually choose the refine option down here at the bottom and then select which contact it is that you're interested in viewing. So for instance, if I wanted to do George Foreman, it's going to show me that I have not sent any of these properties to him by email. Now, as soon as I do, so for instance, if I just ended up choosing a couple of these active listings, sent those off to George, send. There we go. We can now see that George got those sent off to him on today. It also shows us a property fit score. This is going to be directly related to the survey that a client has the option to fill out on the One Home side of things. It's an option. I think it's actually a pretty novel way to at least discover whether or not a particular property might be of interest to me. But there are some clients that, they gave the information to their realtor. They don't want to have to go through the same rigmarole answering a bunch of questions and then, of course, finding that there aren't any properties in their area that actually match their criteria specifically and just have to wait on you anyway. But it's a neat feature. I think the highest score that I've ever seen for a property that I was searching for myself specifically was like a 67 or something like that. But I've also seen other people where they had clients that got exactly the house that they wanted to, and it was like a property fit score of like 80 or 90. Anyway, also it's worth mentioning that there are two different icon sets. Over here on the left, it shows a little folder. If George had ended up receiving this email and actually ended up liking this particular property, a heart will appear over here. If it's something that's of interest, it'll have a little light bulb icon, which I think they've actually gotten rid of in One Home. But for those of you guys who have clients that have been around the block for a while or have old listing data, you can see that in there. And then if somebody actually goes through the process of saying, I don't want this property, or they're not interested in it, you'll see those added with a little trash can icon, which coincidentally happens to be down here at the bottom, that little discard icon. So if somebody didn't like something, just hit discard. Once you guys have discarded something, you actually have to hit that undiscard option in order for it to appear again. But again, that's it for the refine. We also have the save option. Now the save option is going to be, actually, let me remove the refine. Back to clear. There we go. All right, back to save. So save has a couple different choices. We can either do a new saved search. This means that I'm going to take the criteria that I'm searching for, not just the listings, and save that so that I can quickly jump back into that later. So as an example, I had created a new saved search. I gave it a name. I enabled it as a favorite search on my homepage. So when I land in Matrix at the very beginning of my day, I'm going to have my, I want to rearrange it like that. There we go. So I've got my favorite searches over here. So whenever I jump into Matrix, I can just dive right into the Jinx properties that are over or residential properties in Ardmore that are over 200,000. So I can see all of my information really quickly and easily. Now, it's important to recognize that the saved searches don't have to follow a specific criteria pattern. So if you guys are constantly doing CMAs in a specific neighborhood, that's effectively your stomping ground, which is actually an exact use case that I saw the other day. Building into your search all of that criteria and then saving it so that you guys can jump back into it at any given moment will save you guys a lot of time and trouble. So it makes it a lot easier to deal with. In addition to the saved search, we also have the option to save a search where it's connected to a specific contact. And we don't necessarily have to use a favorite search on the Home tab in order for us to be able to save searches. You can also see any of the saved searches that you have under My Matrix and then saved searches. It's just worth pointing out that like here I have 12 different saved searches in the past, some of which are connected to contacts, some of which aren't. But my favorite list here on the first page, it's actually only 12, or excuse me, 7 long, not 12. So saving some saved searches for yourself that aren't on your homepage is a possibility, but most of the time you're saving it to a contact. You can always go back to the saved search, find that. All right, so back to my search. We also have a new speed bar shortcut. It actually looks like we might be able to cover the speed bar towards the end of class, but I still want to run through a couple more things. We also have the carts. Carts are going to be great for those of you guys who have a client that's not particularly giving you guys a search that is going to make a lot of sense. Prime example of that actually is if you have a client that just doesn't have a specific size or a specific area that they're interested in. Maybe they just want to have a house that, faces a certain direction or is in a certain general area. So what you can do is actually put all of those into a cart. So if I found a couple things that might be of interest, just check the checkbox, do a new cart, choose if I want to add this to a specific person or not. Lovely homes, whatever. Save. And then as I'm going through and finding other properties, I can actually add those same property or add any of those properties to that same cart that I had. Let's see, lovely homes. Go. And then once I've collected all of these from any of the various searches that I've done, I can click on view. And notice this is actually showing me the refine option because I connected this cart to a specific client. So I can see that, oh, looks like I haven't emailed these off to him. I'm going to check all of those, email. And again, since it had that refine option, it's already chosen the George Foreman for me, and I can send those off to him. Now, when I get back to my search page, it shows that I've sent all of those off today. Easy peasy. All right. Now, you notice whenever we ended up adding in that refine option, it actually added in a couple extra columns here at the front of the search results. Let's actually go back into a basic search. This time we're going to use Fala. Go. We'll get a price. Everything there is a little bit on the high end. So we'll do 500,000 or more. Still 5 results. Let's do 4. There we go. Okay, that's where the bulk of them are. Okay, got a decent amount of results. I'm going to head to my results page. And one of the things that my client was actually interested in, it wasn't just the price, it wasn't just the bedroom count, bathroom count. They were also interested in checking the acreage. Now, when I'm looking at the base default results page, I don't get to see the acreage of the property. I would have to actually click on each of the properties, go in and see 2.35 acres. Lovely. Ooh, it's a pretty home too. Cool. My client might be interested in this. But when I'm sending them all of this information, well, notably, it's missing the information about that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on the blank space to the right of where the address bar is, notice it turns it into this four-sided cursor. So it's got the four arrows there. When I click on that, I can do insert column, and this will allow me to add in a column from this massive, massive list that shows every single detail that you guys can add to a listing with very little exception. So I can choose acres, click apply, and now I've got a column here that shows the acres of the property, which coincidentally happens to show that one of the largest properties with the largest space is the cheapest. That's funny. Oh, well, I guess these are almost double in size. Anyway, so we've got that acres option added. You'll notice that at the moment, it's actually got three different sort functions here. One is thicker, another one is thinner, and then there's this middle one. The thickest one is actually indicating what the primary sort is. Now, coincidentally, it happened to be a sort function that is on a column that has all the exact same thing. Since our base search criteria is that everything has to be active, this column is actually kind of useless. So instead of doing our acres, where we actually had to click on another column and then do insert, this time we're going to click on that blank space next to the column and then do remove. Same thing goes with subtype. Let's say that one of my criteria was actually to add house. I can see house is the same on all of these. Again, redundant information. I'm going to hit remove column. Now, I also wanted the school district to appear after the address. So just like we saw with the four-sided arrow, we've been clicking. Now let's actually click and drag. And notice we can actually reposition the way that this is actually arranged. So we have the address, school district. Now we've got the acres, so on and so forth. Now, since we got rid of one of the columns that was being used to sort, you notice how now the school district is the primary sort, and then price is the secondary sort. If I wanted to flip this around so that I actually had the price be the primary sort, I wanted it to be smallest to largest, I can click on the price. Notice it makes the arrow thick. The school district is now secondary, and I can flip it or change it back. Now, if I wanted to include the acres as the tertiary sort, and maybe have something else like the square footage be the secondary, there's a kind of trick to this, and I really wish that this wasn't the way that it was, but the easiest way to explain it is this. Watch what happens when I click on square footage after price was the primary sort. Notice the arrow just got ever so slightly thinner. Now we've got this big thick arrow next to square footage. So if I follow that down the line, I've got year built. I'm going to click on that as my primary sort. And now my price is thinner, square foot is thinner, and built has an arrow on it now. So if we end up getting to the point where we want to try and start getting really customized, I can say, let's do square footage is my tertiary sort. So I'm going to click that as the primary. I'm going to click acres, which is going to be my secondary sort. I'm going to click that one second. And ironically, for my third and final sort, which is going to be first, I'm going to click on price. So this way, what I'm seeing is it's going to be sorting by price. And if anything has the exact same price, it's going to be sorting those by acres. And then any of those that have the exact same acreage will be sorted then by their square footage. So there's some utility to that. I think that it's mostly helpful to know that you can click on something as the primary sort and then flip it up and down. Beyond that, the sort methods really are going to be dependent on how you guys would like to use them. Those are just the options that are available. Now, if we've customized this to a point where we actually are very comfortable with the one that we have, or maybe we just want to be able to use this particular layout again in the future, there's a little button up here at the top right that says Manage Display. It kind of looks like a Post-it note with a pen on it. We can give this particular layout a name. So I'm going to say Simplified. There you go. And I'm going to just do Save as a copy. And this way, whenever I get back into a search, if I want to just double check that everything is laid out in the way that I like, I can click on this display dropdown and choose which one I would like to use. Now, some of these are going to be pretty uh, open. So like for instance, this Agent 360 property view, this is just loading the listing details for me. If I switch this over to, let's say the agent thumbnail, it's going to show me a photo view as well as just the basics of the property, including who it is that's actually listing this property. So this all might be useful to you. We also have a client thumbnail view, which in this case issues the uh, listing agent information, and it actually added in something here that says there was a price change on it. But most of the time, people are going to be using either this single line option, which you guys have seen that terminology whenever we click into a listing, you can click back to single line display. So single line is the default. And then we also have all of these up here at the top, including that one that I just created that says my colon and then whatever the name is. So in this case, my colon simplified. This brings back that same view that I was just looking at. And that way I can see things the way that I would like to just by clicking on this drop down. Now, all that being said, if we decide that we don't like this custom look, or maybe we just want to go back to the system default for some reason, there is a button up here at the top that says set/clear defaults. The first option is going to allow us to keep whatever we set here, even if we hadn't saved it as a custom display, we can save that as a default. We also have the option to just go back to the system search defaults, which is what I'm going to do for now. Notice it re-adds all of those columns. It changes how the sort method was so that it's back to the default options. Now, the last thing that I wanted to cover on that is just that my simplified option is actually now able to be used as a report. So whenever we ended up getting in here, I can go into this print option, and that simplified view that I created, my simplified, is right here, and I can even print it with my header and footer at the top, the search criteria included, and everything's laid out in the way that I would like it to be. So again, if I had the client that was interested in seeing the acreage in that specific sort, I can just show them this. It makes it really easy. I was hoping to spend some time on the speed bar, but looks like we ran out of time today. If you guys are interested in that, we do have an advanced matrix and realist class, which I believe we already had for this month. But we always present that at least once a month. Oh, CMAs and matrix is next Thursday. So Thursday afternoon, 1 to 2, it's a 1-hour elective CE credit class. And then this afternoon from 1 to 2, we have the Sentry Key showing service, which is the new showing service, digital showing service that you guys have access to as members. But it's 11 o'clock. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Sorry for all the yawns. I haven't been sleeping well. I got in a car accident on Sunday, totaled my car. So I apologize for that, but hopefully you guys were able to hear through me trying to reconvene all my thoughts. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us. If you have any questions, problems, anything like that, get in contact with us over at the service desk. Here's our contact information, and we will hopefully see you guys in a future class. Stay safe, keep wearing your masks, keep social distancing. We're almost out of it. We can almost get back to doing in-person classes again, which I'm actually looking forward to. So stay safe in the interim, guys, and enjoy this beautiful weather.